यहाँ पे है स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन। यहाँ पे सीधा सा ये क्या बोल रहा है कि डेविएशन, डेविएशन मीन्स, डेविएशन का मतलब क्या होता है? हाँ, डेविएट करना। फ्रॉम वेयर? फ्रॉम मीन। डेविएशन फ्रॉम मीन और स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन ऑफ एमोंग, स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन एमोंग स्कोर्स collected during the field work. Suppose here it is y-axis, it is x-axis. It represents the variable. It represents the number. X represents variable and y represents number. And इधर आ जाओ, उधर से दिक्कत होगा, ठीक है. And here, if you collected like this, you collected this point. In this way, you collected the values like this. The dotted point represents the values of the variables, and here the number of the individuals represented the x variable. And for during the writing of the thesis, it is very difficult to mention all the points in your thesis. So you should determine a common digit which represents the central value, as well as the number represents deviation from the central value. That central value is mean, and this one is the total deviation in positive and negative direction. It represents graphically. It represents graphically. But we want a numerical value to represent in the thesis. Clear? Now, in the earlier time, we simply represent the range. We simply represent the range. What is the range? Range is the lower value and upper value. Lower value and upper value represents the range. But it has the demerit. What is demerit? If we observe the unexpected lower value or unexpected highest value, then the range is biased. Representation of the range is biased. अगर लोअर वैल्यू और अपर वैल्यू में कोई एक स्कोर बहुत ज़्यादा हो गया और ज़्यादा कंसंट्रेशन वहाँ पे है, सपोज कि इन लोअर अपर डायरेक्शन ओनली 1 पॉइंट इज हियर, दैट मीन्स द मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द स्कोर्स आर इन लेफ्ट साइड एक्सेप्ट वन, and here the one score is responsible for the deviation of the range from here to here. In second stage, the mean deviation, a concept that is referred as the mean deviation, is presented for the representation of the score. Mean deviation is presented. That means mean deviation, that is x minus x bar modules divided by n. It is represented as mean deviation. This modules is representation of the modules is necessary because if you sum up all the deviations from the mean in positive and in negative direction, it becomes, the value becomes 0. The value becomes 0. It is the mathematical characteristics. It is the mathematical characteristics. अगर इसके पूरे मीन से माइनस और प्लस को हम जोड़ेंगे तो इसका वैल्यू क्या हो जाएगा? 0. That means to neutralize the algebraic sign, we change it into the modules. Modules मतलब इसके algebraic sign क्या हो जाते हैं, वो न्यूट्रलाइज हो जाते हैं. That some value is represented divided by n. I1 to n, total value deviation of the modules divided by n, it is represented as the mean deviation. But the value is also mathematically not valid. Mathematically ये भी valid नहीं है. तो what is problem? Problem यहाँ पे क्या आ रहा है? Problem is that the summation of the mean deviation of each scores of any sample collected from the population becomes 0 due to positive and negative. Then what is necessary? To neutralize the negative or positive sign, that means the algebraic sign. ठीक है? For the calculation of standard deviation, to standardize the deviation of any sample. And the concept was developed by Carl Pearson. Carl Pearson. And the basis of the standard deviation is very simple. बहुत simple है. If you square the -4, क्या होगा? -4 को अगर आप स्क्वायर करते हैं तो क्या होगा? अरे माइनस कहाँ होगा यार, 16 होगा. If you square the +4, then 16. And then you find the root of the 4. Root of the 16. 4. Root of the 4. 2. That means if we have -2 or -4 and we square up, हमने इसको सबसे पहले क्या कर दिया? स्क्वायर कर दिया. तो क्या हो गया? -4 या 16. एंड देन यू फाइंड द रूट, तब क्या हो गया? वहीं पे आ गया. द सेम मैथमेटिकल प्रिंसिपल इज यूज्ड बाय द कार्ल पियर्सन. सेम मैथमेटिकल यूनिट. दैट मीन्स he at first calculated the sum of a square of deviations, sum of squares of deviations divided by n. That means here when you calculate the deviation squares, that is responsible for the neutralization of the algebraic sign, either plus or minus. And then you keep it under root. It is the standard deviation. And now the value is referred as the standard deviation. And in this way, the Carl Pearson standardized the deviation from the mean. Average deviation from the mean. That is referred as the standard deviation. And here, the standard deviation square is referred as variance. That is the variance. That is the variance. And that means the standard deviation is root under variance. Root under variance. But if the number of samples are large, if the number of samples are large, ज्यादा है, 200 है, 400 है, 500 है, 700 है, लाइक दिस. आपने ज्यादा कोई पॉपुलेशन का पे स्टडी कर रहा है, दैट मीन्स यू हैव द लार्जर नंबर ऑफ सैंपल्स. बहुत ज्यादा सैंपल्स रहेगा. इन दैट कंडीशंस, एट फर्स्ट यू रिप्रेजेंट द variable with respect to frequency. Variable with respect to frequency. And when you represent variable with respect to frequency, it represents the discrete series. Discrete series. It is represented the discrete series. That means each variable is represented by respective frequency. Each variable is represented by respective frequency. Then which nature is changed here? Which nature is changed here? That means if in this condition it is the individual series, it is referred as the individual series. Individual series. That means in the individual series, each score is represented independently. हर एक स्कोर को आप क्या कर रहे हैं? इंडिपेंडेंटली लिख रहे हैं, इंडिविजुअली लिख रहे हैं. दैट मीन्स इट इज द इंडिविजुअल सीरीज. व्हेन वी रिप्रेजेंट द ईच स्कोर इन टर्म ऑफ फ्रीक्वेंसी. जैसे मान लीजिए कि अगर 5 आदमी है, 5 आदमी में जो भी स्कोर्स है वो 5 आ गया, तो उसने आपको इंडिविजुअल में कितने बार आपने लिखा? 5 बार. इंडिविजुअल में आपने कितने बार लिखा? 5 बार. बट इन दिस कंडीशन, in the conditions of the discrete series, that is represented by 5 into frequency 5, score 5, variable value 5, frequency 5. मतलब 5 जो variables है वो कितना बार आया? 5 बार आया. Then it is in condition the variable is represented by frequency. Variables किससे represent हो रहा है? Frequency के द्वारा. That means in this condition the variables, this one क्या हो जाएगा? Is multiplied by the value of frequency. या कैसे मल्टीप्लाइड हो जाएगा? फ्रीक्वेंसी के द्वारा. That means the formula is converted as xi x bar square f I respective frequency, and the total number is converted into the f. जो टोटल नंबर वो किस में कन्वर्ट हो जा रहा है? f में. बिकॉज f represented the value of number. f represented the value of number. That means here fi I1n. This one is the formula for the calculation of the standard deviation for discrete series. This one is the formula for the calculation of discrete series. And when in other conditions, when we have the again more numbers, even 10,000 or 20,000 or like this, then we represent variable in the form of class interval. Then we represent the variable in the form of class interval. Class interval means each scores has the class. Suppose कि अभी ये लड़की क्या नाम है, जो भी नाम है, वो हीमोग्लोबिन का टेस्ट की. And in the hemoglobin, she represents 4 to 6 mg per 100 ml of blood. That means 4 to 6 is a class interval. Okay, 6 to 8. That means 6 to 8 is a class interval. 8 to 10, that is a class interval. That means the variable is represented in the form of class interval. And here, if we represent the variables in the form of class interval, then that each class has a upper limit and a lower limit. Each class has a upper limit and lower limit. In this condition, when you use, then the each class is represented by respective frequency. Each class is represented by respective frequency. जैसे इसने भी लिखा कि 3 से वो 5 या जो भी लिखी है में 7 पेशेंट्स हैं. That 7 is the frequency. तो वो 7 क्या हो गया? Frequency हो गया. And this one is the, but nature is changed here. That is the variable is represented in the form of the class interval. Variable is represented in the form of class interval. And that means it is not possible to calculate the standard deviation in the form of the upper limit and lower limit. In this condition, we calculate the xg or xm, represented as xg or xm, represented as xg or xm. And the xg or xm represent lower limit plus upper limit divided by 2. Lower limit or upper limit divided by 2. That represent the xg and xm. And now the class interval is converted into a single parameter. In this way, it is converted into the single parameter. And when we calculated as a single parameter, then the formula is converted like this. Standard deviation calculated by under root summation I1 n xm minus xm bar fi divided by summation fi I1 to n. That is for the continuous variable. ये जो फॉर्मूला आया, ये क्या आ गया? समेशन xi टू xm, xm माइनस xm बार स्क्वायर fi रेस्पेक्टिव फ्रीक्वेंसी डिवाइडेड बाय समेशन ऑफ द फ्रीक्वेंसी, टोटल फ्रीक्वेंसी. एंड हियर दो चीज यहां पे जरूर समझिए कि हियर इट इज द वेरिएंस. ये तो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट है, आगे भी एनोवा में भी ये चीज आया था. दैट इज वेरिएंस, बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज होता है ये. दैट इज द वेरिएंस. एंड हियर वी यूज द सैंपल. वी यूज द सैंपल. सैंपल कॉमनली मतलब इट इज ट्रेडिशनल टू ऑब्जर्व दैट द सैंपल मीन्स द एन वैल्यू इज लेस देन 30, लेस देन 30. एन को जनरली हम 30 से कम मानते हैं सैंपल के लिए. किसके लिए? बट इट इज ट्रेडिशनली. ये है क्या है? ट्रेडिशनल. अब मान लीजिए कि वेयर समवेयर इफ द पॉपुलेशन इज 10,000 और 20,000, तो फिर वहां पर आप 100 को भी सैंपल कंसीडर कर सकते हैं, उसमें कोई दिक्कत नहीं. ठीक है. बट पॉपुलेशन में अगर कर रहे हैं तो अदरवाइज ट्रेडिशनली वी ऑब्जर्व दैट द 30 n बराबर n equal to 30 is the sample. And when you use the sample, then there is a chance of the क्या biasness. And to prevent the biasness, we use the degree of freedom instead of n. In sample, we use df, degree of freedom, instead of n, instead of n. And the df represents, df is equal to n minus 1. df is n minus 1. Okay. The first change is here. Second, here we commonly avoid the calculation by the method of the continuous series. अब आप पूछ सकते हैं कि ऐसा क्यों? क्योंकि ये तो फॉर्मूला आ रहा है, फिर इसको हम अवॉइड क्यों करते हैं? इन द रिसर्च डिस्क्रिप्शन और इन द पेपर राइटिंग और इन द थीसिस राइटिंग वी कॉमनली अवॉइड द कैलकुलेशन ऑफ द स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन बाय द मेथड ऑफ कंटिन्यूअस सीरीज. ठीक है. इट इज ड्यू टू द चांस ऑफ द बायसनेस in the standard deviation value due to the distribution of scores in the pattern of the distribution of scores in class. In class. For example, if you consider, suppose here, आपका क्या था क्लास? क्लास बताइए कौन सा क्लास है वहां पे? अरे कौन क्लास है बोलो, पहला क्लास. हाँ, अच्छा हटाओ. Suppose here 6 to 8 is a class. 6 to 8 is a class. And the value is 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, 6.3, 6.2 for Aparajita. And another, the 6.8, 6.9, 7.2, 7.6, 7.9 for क्या नाम है आपका? हाँ, गुड़िया. अब ये एक का डाटा है और ये एक दूसरे का डाटा है, ठीक है. बट इफ यू कैलकुलेट द XGM, the value is 7. Then if you calculate the standard deviation by the method of this continuous series, it represents the value, average value more than 7. And it represents average value is less than 7. That means here a chance for the appearance of the biasness is possible. यहाँ पे biasness होने की संभावना है. Why so? We commonly avoid the calculation of the standard deviation by the method of continuous series, and we commonly use the individual series, and if the number is more than we use the discrete series. Okay, कोई problem नहीं. But sometimes we have compulsion to use the continuous series. कैसे कंपल्सन हो जाता है कि सपोज द वैल्यू इज इन कंटिन्यूअस नेचर, जैसे अभी हीमोग्लोबिन की बात हो रही है, इट इज द कंटिन्यूअस नेचर एंड द सैंपल इज लार्ज. अगर मान लीजिए कि 10,000 आदमी, कितना आदमी है? 10,000 आदमी, और हीमोग्लोबिन हमको मिल रहा है 5 से लेके 14 तक, तो हर एक डिजिट्स पर एक एक वैल्यू होते चला जाएगा. यानी 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, तो 10 हो गया. दैट मीन्स द वेरिएबल अपीयरेंस ऑफ द वेरिएबल इज कितना हो गया? 5 से लेकर 14, 90 हो जाएगा तुरंत. अब यहां पे क्या हो जाता है कि वी हैव कंपल्सन, बट ड्यूरिंग द कैलकुलेशन यू मस्ट वॉच द डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ स्कोर्स विद इन द class interval, and if the class interval distribution is uneven, आपको ऐसा लग रहा है कि ये uneven है, सपोज करें लाइक दिस, यहां पे जैसा बतलाया जा रहा है, then you split the classes. Likely here when you observe here, जैसा कि आप यहां पे देख रहे हैं, we split it from 5 to 7 and 7 to 8. Then in this way we decrease the chance for the biasness. In this way we decrease the chance of biasness. Clear? And here if we calculate like this, the standard deviation is represented again the 95% confidence limit by the 1.96 SD. X bar plus minus 1.96 SD. It represents the 95% confidence interval of sample. Why so? It is necessary. ठीक है? In otherwise it provides the standard deviation or the variance provide the basis for the calculation of the a number of test of significances. Number of the test of significances. Clear? कोई दिक्कत नहीं?